The Charter School Connection podcast would like to thank our sponsor, Packed Class, an enrollment and lottery process platform built for charter schools by charter schools to save money while making money. So I recently overheard a question that I loved, and it really stuck with me. It's, do you know your cost per enrollment? I like it because I work with charter school administrators daily, and none of them actually know this. These same administrators throw thousands of dollars a year at marketing, but they don't know, one, what their return is, and two, if what they're doing is even effective. Out of this world. I wish we lived in a world where you could throw $10,000 at a wall and meet your enrollment goals. But in reality, it simply doesn't work that way. Charter Connect is a breakthrough company that tells you down to the penny what your cost per enrollment is, so you know exactly how to reach your goals. And man, can I say that they are good. For example, we just met with a school out in California last week and realized that their website traffic has quadrupled since using Charter Connect. Really? It's a no-brainer. The best part is, if you send them your info on the website, charterconnect.co, with the promo code connection in the description, you will get 10% off your first month. Tell them Jenna sent you. Hiya, welcome to this week's episode of the Charter School Connection podcast. In this episode, Shawn is speaking with Susan and Jeff from Lehigh Valley Academy in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And the conversation was so good that we just jumped straight into the episode. Thanks for tuning in.
Hey, Jeff.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for hopping on this call. Long time no see.
Yeah, it's been a while. I'm glad
Man,
we were able to make this happen. I know when you and I had spoke last, we were talking about, the operations position that I have and kind of the building of the new building. Hi, there she is. Hi, Susan.
hi, Susan.
Hi, how are you?
Doing great. It's great to see you.
So
Good to see you too.
I think if we want to kind of focus on that information, Susan, I mean, that's obviously why I would like to have Susan involved, because she was an integral part of, getting this building to where it is and getting the school to where it is in general. She's been here since the very beginning.
Oh,
It's been quite a journey. I mean, we've been in this business for 20 some years now. So, we've come a long way, starting from a really tiny little charter school with, 170 students and 13 employees to now having 1,920 students and over 300 employees. So it has been a journey along the way. So, there's been some highs and some lows. I mean, we've certainly had some challenges. On the facilities side of things, we've dealt with break-ins, we've dealt with sewer backups, but I think over the course of our last, 23 years, we've definitely, had a lot of really good experiences with, staff that's worked really, really hard and students that are graduating, well prepared for college and beyond. It's nice when you have programs that have been established over time, and we can now, we now have students who want to enroll, who graduated from our school, who want to enroll their children in the school because of the, experiences that they had after they graduated. And sometimes, yeah, and sometimes it's the students that didn't actually graduate, that couldn't wait to get out of us, get away from us, that didn't even actually graduate from the school, that come back and say, you know what I got from your program, whether that was through middle school or through high school, really set me up for my future, and I want that for my children. And so that really means a lot to us, is that we have an opportunity to, we do our part, and then we send them off into the world, and, hopefully as well prepared as possible for a future that, we have no idea what that's going to look like in the world that we live today, and making sure that they're prepared to handle all kinds of different things. And, we have students who graduated from our program and who are you know, who decided to take advantage of their IB diploma and study internationally, and, you know, that are raising families in different parts of the world. And we have students that, you know, stayed local and, you know, are still in the local community and are now, you know, looking to send their children back to Lehigh Valley Academy. So
I think the nice thing, in addition to all the students, former students that have decided to bring their kids to Lehigh Valley Academy, are the ones that actually want to come back and work here. And
Yeah.
I'm sure there's other schools that have been around where their students want to come back and work, but we've had quite a handful of students that came through and ended up being one of our superstar, you know, some of our superstar staff and teachers. I know I had one that worked underneath me who I think the world of, and she ended up, you know, as life usually progresses, she ended up getting married and moving away. And I was so sad to see her leave, but she was phenomenal. She was a wonderful teacher, and it was kind of an honor to have her come back as a teacher. And I believe when Susan was principal, she was, you know, up at the high school under Susan as well. So
Yep.
obviously she thought highly enough of Susan and I that she didn't mind coming back to work for us.
yeah. So, and that's one of the benefits of being kind of a K-12 school, is that we were able to give some of our students who are looking at opportunities in the world of education, you know, a chance. She was actually a student who volunteered in the after-school program as a high school student, and then ended up being an employee in our after-school program in order to, and then went to college, got a degree in education, and then, you know, we were thrilled to hire her for the school, to work at the school. So, you know, but so that's always a really nice thing when you can, you know, when they come with their experiences, which are very different, because, and I think that's what you and Jeff were talking about earlier. You know, when we first started out, our very first year of operation, 2002 to 2003, we were, you know, in a space that had been a high school, Catholic girls' high school. And we had half of the space, and the nuns used the other half of the space as a retreat center. And so, you know, we pretty much outgrew our space before we ever moved in. Had a beautiful gym. The stage of the gym was our cafeteria, and the classrooms were all different sizes. But one of our kindergarten classrooms had been the home ec room, so it had a full kitchen in it, which we didn't use, but it was available for. So that space really, you know, it was low rent, low cost in rent, but like I said, we really outgrew that our first year of operation. So then our second year of operation, we were able to lease space, and we were there for the next 20 years. And the nice thing about leasing space when you're a startup charter school is that, you know, you're continuously growing, and it's really hard to financially be able to afford what you're growing into. So you really have to be able to lease space along the way, that you can afford. And so we were very lucky that, because it was in a corporate center, as flex space, that we could kind of work with the landlord over the years and add additional square footage every summer. And so for, I think, almost 13 years, the first 13 years in that space, every summer we had a construction project. You always had like an 8-week window in order to, you know, fit out the next bit of space in order to expand the program. But that approach really had us only paying the rent for the space that we needed, rather than paying for space that we needed to grow into. And because we had that flexibility, then we went from being in one building to being located in 2 buildings with a parking lot in between us. that we turned into our recess yard. And then a few years down the road, we then added a high school building, which was in a third building next to the other two. So, you know, having that flexibility, building the relationship with the landlord to be able to kind of say, hey, you know, our plan is to expand. We started, you know, 170 students and 13 teachers, K-6, but we knew we wanted to expand to at least 75 students at a grade level. And so we, you know, so by year 2, we were able to, in the new space, grow to 2 classes per grade level, except for 6th and 7th grade. Those were one at a grade level. And I think, no, let me think. No, we actually went to 3 at a grade level. So we ended up at about 325 students. So that second year of operation. And then again, as we were kind of looking at enrollment over time, had other opportunities to then kind of say, okay, let's expand here. And, you know, that's the other thing. We always had the dream of being a K-12 school, but, you know, when you start out in the elementary grades, you're kind of developing expertise in that area. And so we had a lot of interest in our elementary grades, but our middle school was still very much developing. And so there wasn't as much interest enrollment wise there. So, you know, you kind of look at it from an enrollment standpoint as a pyramid, you know, with a really strong base of students coming in the elementary grades, and then fewer kids in middle school with even fewer kids in high school. And so you needed a strong enough base in elementary in order to be able to accommodate all of that. So, you know, there were times where we said, okay, so instead of 3 classes at a grade level, let's expand to 4 classes at a grade level in the elementary grades. That would then allow us to reduce to, you know, 3 classes in middle school and maybe 2 classes at the high school level. And then later on, a few years later, we had such interest in our elementary, and so we did that. And so that to go from 3 to 4, and we did that in some of the kind of at all grade levels at once. And at the time we were really looping with our students. So it was a really tough thing to add students mid-loop. So, you know, we had K1 as a loop, 2nd and 3rd grade as a loop, and yeah, 2nd and 3rd grade and 4th and 5th grade. And so it was really hard to add students mid-loop. So the next time we expanded at a grade level, we really said it was important to kind of do it over 2 years so that we wouldn't impact the loop mid-loop. So we would add students at a grade level, you know, on the even or the odd grade level. So it was grades, K, even K2 and 4, but not at 2nd and 3rd grade. No, not at 3rd grade and 1st grade, because those were the 2nd year of the loop, if that makes sense. And so, you know, over time at different periods, because of kind of looking at enrollment and where we were seeing growth, we at one point expanded to 6th grade levels or 6 classes at a grade level, so 150 students at a grade level. And that was really with the expectation that then in middle school that would reduce to 100 students at a grade level and potentially, you know, 50 to 75 at the high school. But over time, as our programs developed, we really saw fewer and fewer students not continuing through the program. And we had more and more interest at some of those middle and high school levels, to where our pyramid approach really kind of expanded to more of a rectangle, to where, you know, today we actually have 150 students in every grade level all the way through. And we're no longer having to accommodate for that, you know, drop off in middle school or that drop off in high school. And it took a long time for that to happen at the high school level. So, you know, for quite a few years, probably 15, almost 20 years, you know, we had really strong enrollment numbers in K through 8. And then in high school, we really, you know, it was healthy numbers, but it was always like around about 100 students at a grade level. And then in 2023, 23, when we moved into, actually in 22, when we purchased the current location, now that we knew kind of what we were going to look like when we grew up and what our total enrollment numbers were going to be, when we got to that point, then we and we started showing, you know, the new building and that it's going to have a real gym and that'll allow us to offer PIAA athletics and, you know, all of that. Then we really started seeing the increase in students wanting to remain at the school through the high school program, and also an addition of, you know, students coming in. They finally felt like, you know, we're not in a corporate center anymore. This is a real high school building. And, you know, charter schools make any building or any space work, but we've really been able to turn this office building into something that feels very much like a real school building. And because of that, we're really have seen a significant increase in interest at our middle and high school level, particularly, you know, the differences at the high school, to where, you know, a few years ago, I would have said, you know, if we get to 1,900 students, you know, that would be amazing. And I didn't expect to get there anytime soon. And now, you know, this year we were at 1,920, and, you know, 1,950 would be absolute full enrollment. And we'll, you know, probably get a little closer. I don't know that we'll ever be at total full enrollment, just because, you know, some families are going to move away during the school year, and, you know, some of that transition happens. But, you know, we realized that, especially at the high school level, having a facility that was going to allow the students to have a somewhat normal, traditional, you know, experience with athletics and extracurricular activities and all of that, that played a big role in students wanting to be here. Yes, they want the academics, but they also want some of the other components.
Wow. You must be so proud of everything you guys have accomplished.
Yes, every once in a while I like pinch myself as I'm walking in the building going, I can't believe this is ours. So it's, yes, we've come a long way. And, you know, and through that process, there were some plans that we, like I said, one of the things that I appreciate about being part of a charter school is that you have to be somewhat flexible and you have to be able to adjust. You know, you never know what's going to happen. We dealt with the pandemic. We've dealt with, you know, changes in enrollment or increases in increases in enrollment, where we've dealt with, you know, and at one point we thought we wanted to build our own building on a piece of farmland. You know, so we were designing this beautiful building that we were going to move into, thinking that was the right solution at the time in order to kind of create our forever home. And then thanks to the pandemic and lots of delays, and some challenges with traffic patterns around that property, it really became more and more difficult in order to make it happen in the timeline that we needed it to occur. We were looking to, we knew our lease ended at a certain time, and we needed to kind of meet that deadline. And so that then caused us to pivot to look for a, you know, something that already existed that maybe just needed to be renovated. And, you know, now looking back, I'm truly grateful that the other property didn't work out, or that the other project didn't work out, because I think this is serving us a lot better than the other building would have. And the costs are definitely, you know, significantly lower the way that we did it than it would have been had we built new construction, especially after COVID.
I think collectively, when we realized that we weren't going to be able to build our original plan, there was a bit of panic and anxiety, you know, from, you know, the community in its entirety. And then when we found our current place, I think initially we were thinking, at least I was thinking, you know, are we kind of just settling? You know, yeah, it's a great location, looks like a decent building, But then we came and took a look at it, and everybody on the admin team, everybody on the planning team, everybody that was involved in the process, it was like, oh my God, this is it. This is amazing. This is a wonderful place. It provides so much opportunity and space. And, part of that planning process and, Susan was, like I said, an integral part of that. But we started, really kind of looking at how do we want to, I think we were planning on trying to keep all of the elementary school in the north part of our campus, in the building that's attached to a breezeway. And then we realized that that wasn't going to work, so we had to take over, one hallway in the south building, and it all kind of, it was very flexible, but being in this building gave us the ability to be flexible. Whereas the other one would have cost an arm and a leg. It was very much kind of, you're gonna draw it out, where we were able to mold it into what we wanted, being in this place. So I agree with Susan that being where we're at, I couldn't imagine it being somewhere else.
Mhm.
And it just goes to show that you never know what's gonna come your way. Just when you think the rug got pulled out from underneath you, you fall into something even better.
Mhm.
Wow, that's so awesome. And yeah, every charter school has their different path. And I'm super grateful for you both having shared how you got to the building that you're in and how you guys are making it just what you need it to be. So that's amazing.
Yeah.
And um to I am so grateful for both of your time right now. And I was wondering if I could ask, what is your history? Like, how did you get into the charter school world? And that's something that's super interesting to me.
Sure.
Sure.
Susan, do you want to go first, or would you like me to go?
Why don't you go first, Jeff?
Okay. I'm a bit of a fluke, I'll be honest with you. I have a very diverse professional background. I worked in a lot of different fields. My first real career was in mental health. I worked in a residential facility with an alternative education program. I had a minor in psychology in college, so I figured I'd kind of put that to some use. That was shortly after, it was kind of a way to make ends meet after I dropped out of officer training for the Air Force. And I needed something, and I needed something quick, and they were hiring. And what I thought was going to last maybe 6 months ended up lasting 10 years. It gave me a great opportunity. It was that I joke around with people who I work with, or I used to work with there, that it was the best, worst thing that ever happened to me. It was extremely difficult and long hours. And I mean, I could tell you stories that, would make you lose your hair. But I mean, it was a great experience, and I met some of the best people I've ever worked with, and I'm fortunate that LVA has hired some of them to continue to work with me. Um, but yeah, so I did that for 15 years, worked in the mental health field in various capacities at this facility. And then one of my mentors, other than Susan, one of my mentors called me up, and he was the CEO for LVA at the time. It was an interim position, and he asked me if I'd be interested in coming down. I worked in the Poconos. I don't know if you're familiar with the geography of Eastern Pennsylvania, but
Familiar with Pocono, the racetrack, because I'm a NASCAR fan.
yes. So I lived up in the Poconos, closer to the Delaware River, and Lehigh Valley is south of the Poconos by about 40 minutes. So he called me up, asked me if I'd be interested to work at a charter school. I needed a change, and I jumped at the chance. Came down and met Susan and Karen, who's our HR director, who pushed me once I got here after a number of years of of resisting. She pushed me to go and become, get my principal certification, become an assistant principal, and ultimately a principal. So I have her to thank for that, and Susan's support in that as well. But I started out here as a dean of students, and just kind of helping with the logistics of the day-to-day programming, and making sure that our code of conduct and student handbook was critically looked at initially, and then the one piece of advice that I would give if you're asking for any of my advice is never, sit back and think that you figured it all out. You always want to reevaluate and reassess everything you're doing constantly, because there's always room for improvement. And that's something that we did, and I've been fortunate enough, when I used to interview new hires, I actually would say to them that working at LVA is like being on vacation compared to what I used to do. The people I work with, what I get to do on a daily basis is night and day compared to what I used to do. And it's just been phenomenal. And I love being here. I love all the positions I've held, and I'm finally in my ideal position as director of operations and safety. I jokingly said that when I first came here 15 years ago, I said to my mentor who hired me at the time, when I met the woman who was in my position now, and found out what she did, I turned to my mentor and I said, "Who is she and how do I get her job?" And then this position opened up right when we were moving into this building 2 years ago. And I mean, I didn't have to think about it. It was, if Susan and the other administrators were willing to have me in this position, I was going to take it. So glad I did.
Yep. And we're happy he's in that position. So it's really worked out well. So my path has been a little bit more traditional in terms of on the educational side of things. So I'm originally from Germany, but moved to the United States when I was 13. And so I got my undergrad is in elementary education. So, I was convinced I was going to be just a kindergarten or first grade teacher for the rest of my life. And when I graduated from college, there was a hiring freeze, and I went to school in Western Maryland. So there was a hiring freeze in Maryland, and my parents had relocated to North Carolina. So I actually ended up getting a job in Charlotte Mecklenburg School District, where they had a German immersion program that was just starting up. And they were looking for, teachers that were familiar with the American educational system and could work with American kids, but that were fluent enough in German to be able to kind of handle speaking German all day long, and educating in German. So I was there for about 5 years, then had an opportunity. And so it was very much startup. The program had, by the time they hired me in February, I was the third teacher in the class, and the program had just started that school year. So I really, after my few months on the job, I was one of the most seasoned teachers in the program. And I really appreciated having, because it was a startup, it was a magnet school, so it was part of the traditional public school system. But this program was so new that people were really again, flexible and looking for, and as an educator, I really felt like I had a voice in developing that program. And so 5 years later, I had an opportunity to teach at an international school in Frankfurt, and to, again, this time it was partial immersion. So every half of the day was in English and half of the day was in German. And some years it was every other day, English and German. But it, again, was a newer program within the established school. And so, again, I had a lot of voice in being able to create something. It was always a lot of hard work, but I always had, an opportunity to have a say and be part of something new and different, and, kind of have something to show for it. It wasn't just all established, and that's the way we've always done it. And so then after 5 years in Germany, I had gotten my master's degree at the University of Bath in England while I was there, and then in educational leadership. And so I came back to the United States to look for a job that would give me some opportunities for more administrative responsibilities down the road, kind of the thinking like, well, in the next few years, I'd like an assistant principal position and then maybe principal one day. And I came across this charter school. While I was in Germany, I became familiar with the International Baccalaureate. IB program. And when I came back to the United States, it was very much like, I want an IB school. I don't care where I am in the country, but I wanted to be an IB school. And so I came across Lehigh Valley Academy. It was, it was a charter school at the time. I had no idea what charter school meant. I was just really excited that it was a IB school and that it didn't exist yet, and that I was going to be able to be part of something brand new that was just being developed. And so I was hired as employee number one. I was their IB coordinator for half the day and fourth grade teacher for the other half of the day for the first half of the school year. And then halfway through, our CEO at the time, or head of school at the time, resigned, and the board said, we have really limited budget. We really can't afford 2 administrative positions. Why don't you just take on the leadership role, and we'll hire a full-time fourth grade teacher for you? So that's what we ended up doing. And, that was year one. And it kind of went from there. So at different times, I had different roles. It was always, kind of a administrative role. So I was chief administrative officer. And then for a few years in between, I became chief academic officer, and kind of didn't focus on the business side. And then at some point those merged again to CEO. So now, 23 years later, I'm still here, and, every day is a new learning experience. So you always get something, new out of it. So, but since then we've been able to, kind of grow the school, renovate our building, build a gym, and, looking at different ways to kind of move everything forward. But, I thoroughly enjoy, as Jeff does, I thoroughly enjoy my job, and, enjoy coming to work every day. So it's, it's never boring, and it's always hard work. And I still see, as much as we're now an established school, I always see opportunities for growth and development, in everything that we do. And so, I think that'll be the lifelong learner kind of approach is going to be, our motto from now until, I think both of us retire. So.
And for podcast listeners that are starting a new school, or maybe their school is just in the beginning phases, what advice would you have for them? Maybe some lessons learned, or to take a starter school and bring it to what you have today?
I think one of the most important things in charter schools is to be really responsible with the funding. Like, to me, like financial, like it has really paid off for us over the years, but being really kind of responsible, living within your means, understanding as a charter school administrator, you wear lots of different hats, especially when you're starting out. And I was very lucky that I worked with some really good business managers. Like, we outsourced in the first year, and then had a part-time person on staff, but somebody who was really good about helping me understand, kind of the financial side of running a charter school. So I very much come from that academic side of things. And so, you understand the need for the making sure that you're meeting all the legal requirements on the academic side. But I think, something that I've really appreciated over the years is being, very understanding the finances. Where does your money come from? Like, at what point do you need to, grow, or do you need to have the right, what does different levels of enrollment allow you to do? And then where are your priorities? So, as a charter school, we receive less money than the traditional public schools. So we've always had to really figure out how to make that work, like how to live within our means and make that work. And so the same thing with our construction project. We didn't have unlimited funds. When we first came into this building, and they said, met with some consultants, and they were like, oh, you're not going to be able to renovate this for less than 70 million. And we're like, no, for 65 million, we have to buy the building, renovate the building, and we want to build a gym. And we made it happen. So, you know, and we still did all the public bidding and we did all the, you know, but it was always asking questions of, okay, so how much do things cost? What are some of the things that you can do that, you know, kind of give you the same results, but that are a lot more cost effective? So, you know, LVT flooring versus that what's it called? Like the special tile floor that a lot of schools have, or, you know, drywall versus brick walls. And, you know, there's things that built-in cabinetry or building, you know, having furniture on wheels. So there are things that, you know, built-ins are incredibly expensive, but unless that's your kind of area of expertise, you have no idea. And, you know, when you're first starting in, whether it's a construction project or a renovation project, you know, it's always easy to just, the architects will say, hey, do you want this? And you always think like, sure, if they think it's a good idea, it probably should happen. And you don't always understand exactly like how much the cost is associated with that. So, you know, sometimes you have to spend money in order to be able to, you know, do the right thing, and in order to, you know, move the program forward. And you know, but I think understanding where you have choices and making the decisions based on, you know, having all of the information rather than just, you know, blindly trusting somebody else to lead you is I think the advice that I have is that, you know, again, you know, lifelong learning, but really trying to, whatever situation you're dealing with, trying to learn as much as you possibly can, so that you can then make the appropriate decisions along the way is, you know, is probably the thing that I would encourage everybody to do. Because you've got to, you know, financial mismanagement or, you know, not being able to afford yourself is what will close a school, and that's not in the best interest of anybody.
No, that's great. And then I guess my final question is, what lies in the future of Lehigh Valley? Because we've talked about, you know, how you've grown it, and that's an amazing story in itself. And looking to the future now, how do you plan to still work with your community and strengthen Lehigh Valley?
Susan.
Me, okay. So I think, you know, we are finally no longer in the startup phases. So, you know, I feel like we finally can say, okay, we're not startup. And when you're in the startup, it's all about growth. You know, how do we accommodate another 50 kids or another 100 kids? And, you know, you balance your budget because you know, oh, we've going to have this many extra kids and we're now at almost, you know, probably pretty close to like max enrollment, at least max as far as the facility is concerned. So now it's about really making sure that we develop our programs, that we have the strong academics that our families are looking for, and continuing to develop those, that we are the IB school that we set out to be, and really infusing as much of that kind of, you know, internationalism into our educational program. We are still looking to add some on the performing arts side of things. We are looking to have one more facility project happening in the next year, where we're looking to add a little black box theater, because that's the piece that we're still missing in terms of strategic kind of facility plans. Down the road, you know, we'd also love to see some fields or some grassy areas to be able to continue to expand our athletic offerings. So I think some of that is, you know, we are never going to be able to compete if we're just like everybody else. And so trying to stay true to who we are, and that is, we are an IB school, is really what's important to us. And then figuring out how we can make that, you know, the best possible program and still meet the needs of the students that that attend our school. And the honest answer probably is that I really don't know beyond the next couple of years of exactly what our future is going to hold. So, you know, one of the things that makes this such a fantastic job and this journey so exciting is that, you know, we have kind of woven through this in a variety of different ways. And we knew that we wanted a permanent home. We knew that for 10 years before it happened. But what that was exactly going to look like, kind of changed along the way. And so I think knowing that the next, we're preparing kids for careers that don't even exist yet today, that I'm not sure that we know what we have to do for our students until closer to the time that we know what that they're going to need for graduation. So, making sure that we really focus on developing a strong sense of community, that our teachers feel supported, that our students are prepared for their futures, really kind of reflecting on our strengths and our areas in need of improvement is really kind of, our next step, and, trying to be the best Lehigh Valley Academy that we can be.
Focus on quality now instead
Quality.
of quantity. Yes.
Yes.
So I think, I mean, not to repeat what Susan said, but I think that the idea now is to really establish ourselves as a lasting educational program in the Lehigh Valley and make it something that can be a permanent fixture, that long after Susan and I are gone, that will still be here and still providing quality education for students. That quality part now. We have the facility. We're not looking to grow beyond, our means now. So now it's just making it better than what it was yesterday.
Yep.
And if I could just go back to, if I could share some advice to people starting out, I think Susan mentioned earlier that, when LVA was starting out, we were fortunate enough to be in that situation where we could be in a physical space that could grow with the program over the years. And I think that's a very unique situation to be in, but an ideal situation to be in. If there was, a school that was starting out, I would advise them to look for a similar situation where, don't bite off more than you can chew right away. Find a situation that is scalable, something that you can grow with and can grow with your program as well. And then the only other thing that I would say is have the right people involved from the get-go. Susan and a number of other people that have worked at Lehigh Valley Academy that I was fortunate to get to know, such as my predecessor. Like Susan said, 13 years straight, she was fitting out, different spaces, and they were leasing more space, and she was getting contractors involved, and there was a lot of behind the scenes stuff. And if not for the right people in those positions and the right frame of mind and mindset, then, a lot of that probably wouldn't have happened, at least not as efficiently as it did. So be flexible and get the right people in place.
Yep. And I think, building on what Jeff just said, I think everybody needs to realize how hard charter school staff work. We really have to, this is not an easy job. It's a very rewarding job. But especially startup, there's a lot of time and effort that goes into that. So this is not you show up for work at 8 and you leave at 3:30 and you're done with it kind of job. So, you have to be committed and passionate about what the school stands for. And you have to surround yourself with people who are willing to put in that time and effort in the beginning. And that's the same thing with the teachers that you hire. When you're first starting out, you have very limited resources. And so you need teachers that are willing to do a lot with a little, and, realize that things will get better as the program is established, and, you can afford more things in order to make it. But, we still have employees here that have been with us for 22, 21 years, quite a few that have been here for 20, 21, 22 years. And, they go back to remember when we were all unloading the trucks because the furniture arrived the day before the students arrived, things like that. And you need to surround yourself with people who see that as, that was, you can laugh about it, and they're going to, dig in and get the job done in the moment. And, nobody's expecting anything to be handed to them on a silver platter. So, charter schools, like I said, they're incredibly rewarding. And I thoroughly enjoy everything that I do, and you have a lot of opportunity because of that. But you also have to be willing to, really be committed to the job. And it's not, I mean, it's really like a career, and more than just, it's not just a job you show up for and you then, leave at the door. It kind of overtakes a lot of your life, especially in the early years.
That's so cool. Yeah, finding people that are willing to grow with you. They're not just there for like the end goal, but they enjoy the journey. And
Yeah.
yeah, man.
And at different times in that, at different times like we've been around for 23 years. So who we're hiring today is probably very different than what we were looking for in the early days. We have, now everything's a lot more established. And so, we can accommodate somebody who may not have as much, who may need a little bit more flexibility, or, who's not, who doesn't isn't necessarily looking for startup. But in the early years, if you're talking about somebody just starting a charter school, keeping in mind that, you want to be really honest with people about, hey, we're early on in this stage. So it's very rewarding because you're going to have a voice in everything that gets developed. But guess what? You're going to be putting the time and effort into developing it. And, having the right teachers who see that as a benefit, not just as a challenge, is a really important piece in that.
I think having people with that startup mindset, but having it back in the back of their mind is helpful even at this stage. Even though we're not at that point where we have to accommodate to that, or utilize them, not accommodate, but utilize them in that regard. But having people that still have that mindset of, I know it's not my job, but I'm going to jump in and get involved and help out. It's not uncommon to see, our administrators out directing traffic the first week of school. It's not uncommon for, grabbing various people out to, jump in and help out, in the cafeterias, helping little kids open, milk cartons and get their forks out of the plastic wrap and whatnot. But no job is too small. And I think if we continue to foster that mindset that, we're never too big to, get involved and be involved, then I think we'll always see success.
Well, I know our listeners are really going to enjoy hearing your guys' story of how you started from nothing, and Susan's being employee number one. That's amazing. And then also hearing like the plans that you have for the future. And so, yeah, this is a lot of really great material that people are searching for. And I know our listeners are going to really appreciate it. So thank you so much, Jeff and Susan, for your time. It's been amazing.
Thank you, Shawn.
Yeah.